This is Sean Williams with the I Can Project. Today's title actually is Battling Post-Traumatic Stress Syndrome. We know it as PTSD. We're going to be speaking with Melonie Lewis, a retired veteran. She's going to be talking about how she copes and battles with PTSD and how she's been clinically diagnosed with it. Now, unknown fact, veterans are actually more prone to have PTSD, especially those who have been exposed to combat. And the Iraq War, between 11 to 12% of veterans in a year suffered from PTSD. When we go to the Gulf War, we go a little bit up. We're talking about 15%. And now when we're talking about the Vietnam War, we're talking up to 20 to 30% of veterans dealt with or deal with some kind of post-traumatic stress syndrome. Now, it's been defined as an anxiety disorder, mental disorder. You're going to hear from Melonie Lewis. Again, she's going to speak as to what are her triggers, positive triggers, negative triggers. What are her coping mechanisms, positive coping mechanisms, negative coping mechanisms. There's also one statistic that is very alarming. When we're dealing with, again, with veterans, and we're dealing with sexual assault, up to 28% of, reported to the VA anyway, Veterans Affairs, up to 28% of women who experience sexual assault also dealt with PTSD. And now when we talk about sexual harassment, that number actually goes up to 55% of women who dealt with sexual harassment suffered from some form of PTSD. I cannot wait for this interview because it needs to be spoken about. PTSD is a crucial mental disorder or anxiety disorder that not only affects regular civilians, but also our veterans. This is the I Can Project. My name is Sean Williams. Let's go. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the I Can Project. I have the honor and privilege, to interview one of my favorite people.
Oh,
definitely one of my favorite Lewises.
You probably shouldn't say that on camera.
I'm definitely going to say it on camera. Melonie Lewis. Melonie, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for being here, right? So we're going to jump right into it.
Okay.
Mel, you are a retired veteran, correct?
I am retired.
And what, and correct me if I'm wrong, department of the military? Army.
Yes.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. I retired in January of this year.
Okay.
After just about 20 years in service. I actually retired medically due to some of what we're going to talk about today, I presume. So I had a medical retirement, fully honorable, obviously. Decorated combat veteran.
Top flight.
Top flight, right. Iraq veteran, had a couple of deployments in my tenure. And I retired as a Army major. My last duty was I was the commander of the Medical Readiness Detachment out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Okay, so for us ignorant individuals, like myself,
Stop.
right? Explain what that is, right? So you're an Army commander. Okay. What exactly does that entail?
I had about just over 100 medical personnel, doctors, nurses, social workers, psychologists, combat medics, dental technicians. All of them were my soldiers. They served underneath me. So I, directed all operations, personnel, training for those individuals while they served in the Army National Guard.
Okay.
So while they served the state of North Carolina, I was basically their leader, for lack of a better word.
Your leader. So you talk a little bit about the retirement aspect of things, and you stated it was for medical reasons.
Yes.
So let's just jump into it. So it was an involuntary retirement.
Technically, yes.
Okay.
So my post-traumatic stress disorder reached levels that made it more difficult, especially, with the onset of COVID or going through COVID, made it more difficult to do my job effectively as an Army leader. I mean, I didn't have any issues with serving, with leading my soldiers, but personally, I felt like it was time for me to leave the organization and focus on different areas of my life and further my career in alternative ways.
Okay.
So
now let's touch a little bit, and we're going to talk about those alternative ways, but let's touch a little bit about the post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. When were you officially diagnosed?
I was diagnosed officially in 2016, actually. But the Army did recognize as far back as the Army and Department of Veterans Affairs, obviously, recognized as far back as 2009. That's when I came out of Iraq, that I was identifying issues. So after returning from Iraq, I started seeing a life coach, actually, because I did recognize that something was different about me than before I, went to the combat zone. And so I started seeing a life coach, and it was no cost to me, thanks to Military One Source and some other organizations for veterans. But then I didn't feel like it was addressing any of my psychological, and behavioral needs.
Okay. Like what, if you don't mind me asking? So you felt a difference, right? Mm-hmm. Pre-Iraq, you felt one way. Post-Iraq, you come home. We're talking about what, 2009?
2009, yes.
You come home and you're like, something is different.
Yeah, let me give you some examples. Concentration was one. My ability to focus. So before going to Iraq, school was easy for me. Okay. Right. I received a bachelor's degree in mathematics. It was pretty much not going to say a breeze, but I love math.
No, you're a math genius. Like I'm legitimately speaking to like a math prodigy on the low, but that's neither here nor there. That's another subject for another day.
But it was pretty much easy for me. So I completed my bachelor's degree, and then I went straight into graduate school the very next semester. And I didn't really have any issues there either. Yeah. And then the semester after I completed my master's degree in math, I was informed that I'd be going to Iraq. So, but coming back from Iraq, and I'd already applied to a doctorate program, but I did not feel like I could start the program. Yeah. So I actually had to defer my enrollment for my PhD. And then, so concentration, focus, the ability to not worry as much, worry about tomorrow, worry about the environment around me, worry about, individuals in my circles, in school, anywhere. So when I was seeing the life coach, it was more like, okay, let's put your life in order. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And I kind of already had a plan, right? I was going to get my doctorate degree. I'd started working for the federal government as on the civilian side, not full-time military at the time. And so I was kind of like, I don't know if life coaching is really what I need, right? I can have it together. Yeah. I have things together, right?
You had your game plan.
Yeah. My life was in a pretty good place. Yeah. So then I decided I probably need to transition to an actual, licensed therapist, and I started seeing a psychologist. And she was able to help me address my psychological needs, right? She was able to give me tools to help me focus, to help me concentrate, to not think worst case scenario, which is one of the things that I think I gained in Iraq, both training for the deployment and then while I was there, to think, what's the worst that can happen, and try and prepare myself, right, mentally for that.
It's kind of not funny that you say that, because as you speak, I just think about how human beings, sometimes we are trained and we may not even necessarily know it, to start thinking, okay, what's worst case scenario? Mm-hmm. What's the worst that can happen? So for example, I see clients on a daily basis as a lawyer, whether it's criminal, personal injury, whatever it may be, and they automatically, the switch is just automatic. They just automatically start thinking, worst case. And I'm like, we're not even there. You're not even retained my services yet. Like, you already
put down in your retainer.
Yeah, exactly. We're not even
discuss that.
Yeah, let me talk about this later. But it's interesting that you say that, and if that was one of your triggers, not triggers, but one of the components that you identified as, okay, maybe this might be an issue, as to the fear of what's going to happen, worst case scenario. Imagine the amount of people, right, just out and about that may be dealing with PTSD, some form of PTSD, right, and not even addressed it or not been aware or conscious enough to, okay, maybe I do need to seek.
Exactly. Like you said, we all have some ability to kind of go to the negative first, and it actually happens a lot often, right? And I just was telling somebody last week, why isn't that we just think about the positive effect first, right? Why isn't that we just kind of hold on to that aspect versus putting the negative to the forefront of our mind, right? So imagine if most people, like you said, kind of generally do that, right? And then you have this institution, right, or this organization who wants or trains you to kind of do that every day, and not just one day a week. We're talking months, you know, and for some individuals it's years, right? Wherever they're stationed, wherever they are deployed to, you know, if they're in South Korea or wherever they may be stationed, right? Sometimes they're there 2, 3, 4 years. And so they're always thinking, they're always on high alert. They're always ready, you know, for something to go down or to react in some way, right? So that was kind of where I progressed, right, in the negative way. I'm not going to say the Army was the sole cause of, you know, my thinking and my disability, right, for lack of, or different ability,
correct,
for lack of a better word or phrase. But it definitely made it worse. It was definitely a catalyst for, you know, where I am today. So
and you know, the VA actually also speaks about that, because I did my little research.
Okay.
And the VA talks about how individuals that have been exposed to combat exposure gives you a way heightened level of PTSD than regular civilians, because you're facing, as you mentioned, you're being trained to go into this combat. Then you are in the combat, then now you got to come home and switch it off. How does one even do that?
So think about it, like we're from this area, right?
Yeah.
DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia. You ever been in a bad neighborhood or driving through an area that you know is rough, right? Or historically probably isn't somewhere you really want to be at night, or even by yourself, right? Or even with other people. And in that instant, you're kind of like, okay, I know I'm passing through, or I just need to stop and drop somebody off, or maybe I need to pick somebody up, right? So all those feelings that go, and you're kind of like just in that moment. So once you get to safety, for lack of a better word, you're able to come back down. You realize, okay,
switch it
nobody's
off.
Nobody's gonna drive by and shoot me, right? So you're able to switch that off. So imagine having those same feelings, but again, for weeks and months at a time. You're still in that rough neighborhood, right?
That's crippling. How do you function?
And so it is difficult. When you come back to quote unquote safety, it's almost like there isn't a such thing. It's almost like, nobody was out to get me before I left, but then I also didn't think this way. You know, I didn't have certain insight, right, into just human nature, right, or, you know, cultural differences, right? So now you're thinking about all these different aspects of you know, humanity and the environment that were taught to you, right, and they still exist somewhere in your subconscious, but they're more woke than you actually want them to be. So it is difficult to turn it off, and that's why you have, well, for me anyway, I had to go to therapy. I had to be trained. I had to do exercises, right, where you know, I literally had to tell myself that I'm probably not going to die today, right? I mean, and it sounds extreme, but more than likely I'm not, right? There's also ways a possibility. More than likely nobody's going to harm me in the grocery store. But we saw, you know, the Buffalo grocery store shooting, right? So obviously things can happen, but it does take a lot to come down off of 1,000, right? At all times. And then we all have things going on in our lives, right? We have sick parents. We have children with exceptional needs. We have employers who, are micromanagers or aren't accommodating. So some of those same heightened senses, right, of alert, of distrust, of anxiety are still there.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's every day is somewhat of a challenge. And in its own way.
So that was 2009.
That was 2009.
We're now in 2022.
Yes.
How have you battled? Because there's no cure, right? There is no, you take this and 2 weeks from now you'll be fine. It's been diagnosed as an anxiety disorder, mental disorder, right? That literally cripples you. And some people but we'll talk about the other aspect of things. So how have you battled? I don't want to say cope, but how have you battled this?
It's honestly been more of a roller coaster.
Okay.
Right? There are days and weeks when all is well, right? My anxiety is somewhat low. My depression is not a big deal, right? I can get out of bed. I can do what I need to do in a day. And then there are times when I'm at the top of that roller coaster, or I'm climbing, that hill. And I don't want to get out of bed, or I am, taking a personal day off of work with nothing to do, nowhere to go. I just probably need to process my thoughts and my emotions. And so that's why I say every day is kind of not necessarily a battle, but for some people it can be. I mean, it can be a true, I have to purpose in my mind, in my heart, and in my body to keep going, to keep moving, just to do some of the normal daily activities, right? Yeah. Bathe, cook, or get you something to eat. Go outside, whatever the case may be. And there is no cure, and there is medication, but again, those medications are, you have to see a professional, right? Correct. You have to see a licensed clinical social worker or a psychiatrist to prescribe those medications. And they do help somewhat to lessen the anxiety, to increase the concentration, to help with the focus. But there's still no cure. Correct. I mean, right now, on my full-time job, I have a reasonable accommodation because I have a hard time just being in the office around other people. For long periods of time because of that distrust of, somebody out to get me. And not just shoot me or harm me physically, but emotionally. My career, are you out to damage my career in some way? Are you trying to show me up and so that I look bad in front of my supervisor, or it's just these parallel thoughts of danger, of harm. So, you do the best you can, right? Prayer definitely helps me. And then I have a large family, a large community, and people that I can go to. And I can tell them, honestly, today I'm having a bad day. Yeah. Today I need you to, pray for me. Today something triggered, some feeling or some thought that either put me back in Iraq, put me back in an environment of God. Right. Am I going to make it out of this? Am I going to make it home? Am I going to make it to the next day? Or, it could just be just something that not normal people, but people with different levels of ability.
Regular civilians. Right,
could just roll off their back, right?
Us regular civilians.
Yeah, you know people. So, but yeah, it's a challenge. But again, there are people who have dealt with trauma, that's not military trauma, right? Who suffer from PTSD, and they'll probably tell you the same thing, right? Which is why I think we can categorize this or lump it all up maybe under the same umbrella, right? And you really honestly just do your best you can, live one day at a time, try to focus on the positive and the small wins, as we sometimes say in the military.
Okay. Well, you touched on a few things with that sentence, actually. And the first thing I wanted to touch on is, have you identified some of your triggers?
That's hard.
Okay.
Some that I know for sure are
If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, no, I have no problem. Don't scare me, right?
Okay.
Don't jump out.
So no surprise parties for you.
Yeah, no pranks, no surprise parties, no rah. Don't do that to me. Don't walk up on me. Just and even though you don't know that you like, for example, my daughter, who she's in college now, but when she did live at home every day, I could be in my room minding my business, or let's say in my bathroom, hanging up a towel, and she comes around the corner, but I don't hear her, I don't see her.
Yeah.
That will send me, right? I can go from 0 to 60 in like a third of a second, because just in that split second, I'm out of control. I don't have control of the situation. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know you were right there. It's the same thing with, like you said, just the surprises, right? Yeah. Don't jump out at me or any of that kind of stuff, because
you might get punched in your face.
You might get punched in the face. You might get kicked, right? True story.
Survival.
True story. I went to see I Am Legend, and I went with Marquise. I can't remember who I went with, but I went to see I Am Legend, and there's a scene where Will Smith is like walking through whatever the city, and there's nobody there, and then he walks up on like this building, and it's like dark, and it's like these like zombie dogs or whatever, like jump out or whatever, and I just went off. I actually ended up kicking the person in front of me in the head, right? As I jumped back in my seat, and I was just like literally kick this person, and so. You got other people who are like, yeah, I don't like scary movies either. That probably would have happened to me too. But it's something about that split moment where it's like, there's something unnormal. Right. So there's something not normal about this instant right here. There's something frightening. And so, yes, that is a trigger for me. Another huge trigger that I just learned over the last couple of years is feeling like I've done something wrong, right? Specifically on the job. And this is how I came to learn it. When I first started at where I work now, I would try and get my work done like quickly, right? Today might be Monday, I might have a suspense of Friday, right? But I want to have the task done by Tuesday, right? Gotcha. Because again, that's the way I was trained in the military, right? You take care of first things first, you get the mission done, and that's just how it is, right? You're not really taught to procrastinate on purpose, right? But I'm a civilian now, right? And so I'm doing this, I'm doing these tasks, so to speak, and then my supervisor recognizes, well, you miss some details, right? Or you're rushing to do your work and you're failing to pay attention to detail, which is another one of, my a result of the trauma, the PTSD, is a lack of attention to detail. And so I'm thinking, I'm not rushing to do the work. I'm doing, the task to standard, right? And this is what I was thinking anyway. But I came to learn just by other people reviewing my work, no, you missed maybe this step, or you could have done this thing differently. And again, that wasn't my case before. Which is
weird to me, right? Because you and I think somewhat similar as to math. We see life as math. Yeah. And life is just a bunch of formulas.
Steps, processes.
Literally process. Bam, 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 bam. You're going to get the result that you want.
That's it.
So you missing a step is like shocking to me, because I know how you break down life.
And you haven't known me for 42 years. I've known myself. So imagine me now saying, how could I overlook that? How could I miss that? Or why wasn't I paying more attention, to do this more correctly, right? And so, but that recognition from my supervisor, right, was a trigger for me to feel inadequate. Maybe there's something wrong. Maybe I'm going to lose my job, right? Like
that worst case scenario.
Right. I have tenure in the federal government. Yeah. It probably would take an act of Congress for me to lose my job, like literally, right? Unless I did something really, really crazy, which I don't plan to do. But that's not, my mind went to, what if, this keeps happening? Yeah. What if, I accidentally, because I'm a budget analyst, right? Yeah. What if I accidentally spend millions of dollars or waste it, right? Yeah. Or abuse it in some way, when it was really just maybe like one or two mistakes, right? So that's a trigger for me. And then I have those feelings, that anxiousness sets in. And then that maybe I don't want to go, maybe I shouldn't go to work tomorrow. Maybe I should resign, just this rabbit hole that I tend to go down. So back to your question, the triggers for me are just anything frightening or anything that makes me feel inadequate or less than, or like I've just done something incorrect, because I feel like the second and third order effects are going to be much more damaging.
Yeah.
But again, I'm trying, right? I'm being taught still not to go there necessarily, right?
Well, but then it also goes to your maturity level as to you even knowing that there is an issue. Because again, you're military. I've known you for
what, 14 years now?
Give or take.
Okay.
Give or take. Like what, 2010?
Okay, 12.
12 years.
Yeah.
And the whole entire time you've always been strong. Like you've always been. So for you to even say, well, hold up, I feel there's something there. Like there's I don't want to necessarily call it weakness, but inadequacy, right?
Yeah.
For you to even identify that, that's a form of strength. But what did it take to even get you there?
It took a lot. It took life, right? COVID, right? COVID took us all to a place of isolation.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of us, where, for me anyway, I didn't have a choice but to kind of sit sometimes and focus and dwell on myself, what's going on around me, right? Yeah. I live alone now. My daughter is in college, like I said. And so with COVID, I found myself in a place where I was just a lot of times by myself, with myself. And I had to start recognizing those certain patterns or those certain trends of those little inadequacies or those little differences in myself and my character, and compared to the way I did things before, maybe even years before. I told someone when I had to begin taking anxiety medication, when I chose to start, I was over 40 already. I spent 40 years experiencing way worse, quote unquote, stuff, right? And then losing mom in 2020 also was somewhat of a trigger. And I did not know that at the time, right? It took a whole year plus for me to know that whole time frame in my life where, mom was getting sicker and then ultimately passed, took me back years, mentally and emotionally, right? It took me to those places of that whole time frame. That process took me to a place of there's nothing I can do to change this outcome, right? It's going to be whatever it's going to be. Well, that's similar to being in a war zone. There's nothing you can do. You can fight back, right? You can react. But if someone wants to harm you, if someone doesn't like your presence in their country, in their environment, whatever the case may be, they're going to do whatever they're going to do, and you have no control over that, right? And so that's kind of how, over the last couple of years, I've been able to recognize some things, and then I've been able to, again, just pay attention to those patterns, right? Or, okay, the last time I felt like this, what was going on? What happened right then? Oh, that's when I made that mistake at work. Or that's when there was some uncertainty in, my daughter's financial aid or whatever, right? It was something that I felt was somewhat big or influential that kind of took me to this place. So that's kind of how I've been able to kind of reverse, right, the side effects. Not fully, but at least in that moment, right? Okay. And then I went through a really, really bad depression earlier this year, having retired from the military. Because again, I spent 20 years of my life, almost my daughter's entire life, in the Army, or Army National Guard or active guard or whatever the case may have been. And so again, that sense of purpose, right? That I know this thing, right? It's kind of like parenting. Once you get to a point where your kid is in high school, right? Things come up, but for the most part, I know this, right? It's like changing a diaper. The first time, you might have been like, okay, what in the world? Especially when it was one of them really wild ones, right? But then by the time they're in training pants,
I'm a veteran.
diapers
I'm seasoned at this one.
Exactly. That's nothing. So that's how I felt about the military. Like, for the most part, I know this. I've done trauma and military, I've done anxiety and military. So that I knew. I've led soldiers. I've helped soldiers. I have, been their social worker. I've been their whatever they needed. So that part of my life I felt like was in, or it was under control.
Gotcha. So you leaving that, going into the unknown.
Exactly.
That triggered.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So yeah, so it was it was somewhat bad, and then I did get COVID in right after Christmas. So in January, so around that same time frame, right, there was this uncertainty. There was what's going to happen next. What if? And so it was the ebbs and flows of anxiety.
So in my journeys, right, I've dealt with individuals who retired veterans as well that suffer from some kind of PTSD, but some of them go complete different route, literally jump off. I mean, like just completely different route. What has kept you in, I want to say, in that pocket of being able to be aware, being conscious of what's going on the very right now? What's my trigger? What, I don't want to say what's the secret sauce because everybody's different, but what's the difference for you?
I don't want to get deep, right? But and everybody is different. I was taught, and I had very, very strong examples, right? My mom definitely being one of them, and she was a very God-fearing woman, and she taught me what she knew, right? And what she gave me, she didn't name it anxiety. She didn't name it depression, right? But what she gave me when facing things, when facing lives and uncertainties was, faith, hope. Not necessarily, God, but no matter what you believe, always try and have that faith, always have that hope that something is better, because the alternative is what, right?
It's true.
And so being rooted and grounded in these teachings of, or the hope that there's always a better tomorrow, that something better is to come, that, God is able to keep that which is committed unto him. So if I call myself a child of God, then I'm probably going to be able to get through this. Or what somebody told me recently, her name is Lindsay Jeffries. She's also a licensed therapist, was consider your reference, right? And my reference point is the last time I went through something, right? And I just shared this with my daughter. The last time I went through something, I thought it was big. I thought this was like, man, this could probably take me out. Like, I might not make it to tomorrow. And then I did, right? Because now I'm here today going through this thing.
Correct.
So again, I wouldn't say it's a secret sauce, but thinking about how I made it through, right? And how maybe even something worse has come my way, and that thing didn't take me out. I thought that would, and it should have, right? And justifiably so, but it didn't. I'm still here to tell the story. I'm still here to face something else, another thing, right? And then also obviously having that belief that it's God that's pushing me through that. Another big thing for me is, and I like to tell people that I don't believe that I'm here and I go through things for me. Right? I feel like that my purpose for my journey is to be a testimony for somebody else, right? And again, that's one of the greatest things I did love about the military was counseling and guiding soldiers and being that just that voice to kind of help them along, right? Sharing my story and my testimony to help them see a brighter day, to help them become self-sufficient, to help them overcome whatever challenges that they're facing. So keeping that in the back of my mind that, Melonie, you're going through this, but who's going to need to hear this story? Who's going to need to hear?
And that's the whole purpose of this show is to, because the way it came to me was, the way I read the Bible is a roadmap. Whatever you're going through, somebody's gone through it. So you might as well just read up, see how they dealt with it, and keep it pushing, right? But just in life in general, whatever we're going through or whatever we're currently in, somebody has gone through it. So the purpose of the show is to highlight individuals who have gone through this and show what their roadmap looks like for somebody else, even if it's just one person to view it and be like, man, you know what? I'm going through something like this. Maybe I should do it this way or the other. That's literally the sole purpose of this show. So you literally hit that right on the head, because that's, like you mentioned, that's life for us, right? We don't go through what we go through because of us. Human beings, we are very selfish creatures, but it's not about us. It's always about the next person.
That's
or
right.
serving the other person. So with that being said, let's transition. You retired January of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you at now? What are you doing now?
So now I am a budget analyst for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA.
Okay.
I manage a multi-million dollar portfolio for logistics, everything that moves.
Yeah.
As far as emergency management, disaster response, every commodity, I basically budget for that.
Okay.
So right now we're still responding to Hurricanes Fiona and Ian. And so a lot of those moving parts, I don't necessarily move them, right? I don't do the operation side of it. I'm more of in the background, making sure that the funding is there and appropriately spent on, what the taxpayers trust us to spend it on. So like I said, I have a college student. She's a senior this year.
Yeah.
Yay! Shout out to Elizabeth City State. And so at this point, I call myself on cruise control, right?
Okay.
I'm enjoying life.
Okay.
I am, I say I done my bid, so to speak. Me, yes, I'm still working for a living, but I'm able to, I'm at a place now, that I'm able to enjoy things that are there to enjoy, have those moments. My daughter just asked me recently this week, like, as an adult, right? And she's 21, she's just getting into some adult lessons, right? Learning some stuff. And she'd ask me, like, when do we ever get a break, right? Because sometimes it seems like it's one thing. It seems like it's one thing after the next, after the next, right? Never. So, I explained to her, like, I'm in a place where when I notice that this is a break, I embrace it, right? Yeah. It might be vacation. Correct. It might be a baby shower. It may be a graduation. Who knows? But I consider that today is the break, right? Correct. Like, during this thing, while I'm enjoying this thing, I'm not stressing about that thing. I'm not anxious about A, B, and C. I am just enjoying this moment. And I'm at a place now where I can have a lot more of those moments than I used to be able to. Because I'm at a place of somewhat comfort, right? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what's around the corner. But I do know that the last 2, almost 3 years were very unexpected and very hectic. And so since we're kind of transitioning out of the pandemic life, so to speak, I'm able to just enjoy each day, do my work, even though I might slip every now and then, but do it to standard and finish my PhD. I'm graduating in May of next year. That is the plan. Thank you. I am ABD and I am on track to finish that in industrial engineering. So, life is good. Life is good. Life is better, I should say. Okay. It's much better. Well, on that note, we're going to end it with that. Okay. Life is good. It's just what it is. That's it. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here.